What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my national championship preview and prediction. After two instant classics in the Rose Bowl and Sugar Bowl in the college football playoff semifinals, fitting that the two teams that were undefeated in the regular season and have remained undefeated up to this point are going to meet for a national championship game. The Washington Huskies are the last champions of the Pac-12 conference, and they're going to look to send the Pac-12 out with a bang. But they're going to get to play what's going to be a familiar opponent as the Huskies go to the Big Ten next year. They're going to get a little taste of what life in the Big Ten is like when they play the Michigan Wolverines. These two teams played in 2021. They're going to play again next season, but right now the stakes have never been higher between these two schools. They will play for a national championship in NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. We will talk everything, break this game down in depth with the Huskies and Wolverines. But before I go anywhere, just want to let you guys know, I'll make it quick this time. Thank you for all the love and support that we saw in 2023. My channel grew by over 1,000 subscribers, and we're almost at 1,800 right now. Let's continue to see the channel grow in 2024. Interact with the channel any way you can. Watch my videos, subscribe, ring the bell, like, comment, share. Anything you do to interact with the channel helps support me and what I do on YouTube. And I'm very grateful for everyone that has had a hand in growing the channel to the length that it is at right now. But beyond all of that, let's finally dive on into this national championship game, a future Big Ten matchup. In fact, we're going to get it next year, as I've stated earlier. But the Washington Huskies and Michigan Wolverines, two very different styles of football here, going to be clashing in Houston for the national championship. This is just going to be such a fun game to watch. Let's break down the statistics that both of these teams have put up this season. And I'm also going to kind of tell you a little bit about the stats they put up in their college football playoff semifinal games. So we'll start with the designated road team, the number 2 team in the country, the Washington Huskies. And it just seems like this is a Washington team that continues to find ways to win. It continues to be doubted, and it continues to overcome the adversity of all the doubters they have out there. They're going to be doubted again in this national championship game, but this is a Husky team that can ball, especially offensively. Michael Penix, they were making Heisman winners rethink their vote on New Year's Day against Texas. He looked absolutely fantastic. Michael Penix only had 9 incompletions, was 29 of 38 for 430 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game against Texas. Dylan Johnson ran really well, only 2.3 yards per carry, but he got in the end zone when it mattered. 2 rushing touchdowns for Dylan Johnson in that game. You figure he's going to try to be a little bit more of an impact in this game here against Michigan, especially considering what we know this Michigan secondary, and defensive front can do. This Michigan defense is absolutely stout, but this is a Washington offense that can sling it all over the yard. We know Michael Penix Jr. and his dangerous trio of wide receivers. Roma Dunze had over 100 yards. Jalen Polk had over 100 yards. Jalen McMillan, 5 catches for 58 yards, 1 touchdown. Even Jack Westover had 6 catches. He got involved in that playoff semifinal game there against Texas. This is an offense that, however, did really struggle on third downs. Usually, it's a really good third down team. They have to get better on third downs if they're going to want to run through this Michigan defense and put some points up on the board. And turnovers, while they have plagued them throughout the season, did not plague them in the game against Texas. Again, the Michael Penix interception woes can't come back up. But if Penix plays like he did in the Sugar Bowl, in the Superdome against Texas, I mean, Michigan's defense is in for a rough day. And what Michigan's defense was able to do so well, that we will talk about here more in depth as this video goes on, is they were able to create pressure to Jalen Milroe. In terms of statistically, this is a Washington offensive line that's better than Bama's by a factor of more than 4. They've only allowed 11 sacks this year, one of the top offensive lines in the country. Washington's going to be really hard to stop offensively. We'll talk about the Michigan defense later. Let's talk about the Washington defense. It definitely broke down there late in that game against the Texas Longhorns. Again, it continues to find ways to help it win games. That defensive back, whose name is escaping my mind, that knocked the pass away from A.D. Mitchell at the end of the game. It is plays like that that have helped Washington win games all season long. But this defense, I saw an aggressiveness and a sort of intensity out of this defense for the most part in that Sugar Bowl that I have not seen from Washington really all season long. You can tell how much it means to this team. Braylon Trice was an absolute force in that game. He had 2 sacks against Texas, 3 tackles for loss, and this is a Washington offense that or Washington defense, my apologies, that look, may not be the best at stopping the run, may not be the best at stopping the pass. But when they are doubted and when you least expect it, Washington is going to come up and make some plays. If you turn the football over, they will make you pay because of what this offense is capable of. And this is a Washington team that absolutely thrives in the underdog role. Michael Penix has been an underdog throughout his entire collegiate career, injury after injury. He has stepped up. He's played it really, really well as an absolutely phenomenal quarterback with phenomenal weapons. And this defense, while statistically it might not be pretty, and while it might give Husky fans heart attacks pretty much almost every other play, I'm sure Husky fans can speak to that. This is a Husky defense that continues to find a way to win. It's going to be really difficult to find a way to win against a Michigan team that really started to get going offensively. Now, say what you will about the whole Connor Stallions thing, but statistically, Michigan's offense dropped off after Connor Stallions left. Again, I'm not going to draw a conclusion from that. You can draw whatever conclusion you want from that. But that Michigan offense woke up in the game against Bama, and they had to do some things that they weren't necessarily, I don't want to say comfortable with, but they weren't used to doing all season long. Michigan loves to run 12 personnel. If you don't know what that is, it's one running back, it's two tight ends. It's what Michigan thrives on. They went away from that in the first half against Bama. They ran a lot of 11 personnel, and it worked effectively. A lot of misdirection plays really got Alabama off base too there as well. But when you take a look at this Michigan team, I mean, J.J. McCarthy, finally, he started to really get back to his old self. He was making a ton of phenomenal plays, going back to his stat line here in the game against Bama. Let me pull it up 1 second. McCarthy was 17 of 27 for 221 yards and 3 touchdowns. One to Roman Wilson, who had a huge impact late in that game. That final drive, Roman Wilson made a couple phenomenal plays, including the one where the ball was tipped at the line. Roman Wilson had to climb the ladder to get it. He went up and got it, set Michigan up with 1st and goal. He would get the game-tying touchdown that ended up sending the game into overtime. But Tyler Morris, with his first touchdown of the season, he got involved. Blake Corum ran for 83 yards, 4.4 yards per carry, and a touchdown, and got his first receiving touchdown of the year there as well. Now, this Michigan offensive line may not be where it has been in the past couple of seasons, but this is a Michigan front that can still bully you, is still really physical, and against a team like Washington that doesn't bring a ton of pass rush, yes, they have guys that are capable of getting back to the quarterback. I mean, take a look at what Braylon Trice and some guys like Edifwan Ulo Fascio and TFZ, I believe I'm getting those initials in the right order. The ZTF, sorry. My apologies there to the Washington faithful. So this is a Michigan offensive front that's going to have to be really ready for this Washington pass rush, for what this Washington pressure is going to be able to bring, because Washington's going to try to disrupt this backfield. Again, I'll talk to you more about what I think is going to happen here later, but this is a Michigan offense that has looked maybe the best it's looked all season in that game against Bama. And yes, they had ball security issues. Yes, there were things on the field goal unit side. You had a high snap in which threw the kicker off rhythm that missed a field goal that would have cut the lead down to 1. The extra point attempt, the snap that went over the head that could have won the game for Michigan in regulation. But again, hindsight is 2020. When you take a look at what this Michigan team has done all season long, it's just physicality. They've really mixed up a lot of different players that you're not used to see playing. Alex Orji came in and played. Mullings came in and played in that game there as well. And then again, Tyler Morris, a guy that only had 11 catches coming into the game, got involved in the pass game. Michigan's going to look to try to do the same sort of formula against this Washington team. Maybe go back to a little bit more of 12 personnel, as again, this is a Washington team that does not have a killer defensive front like what Alabama does. But speaking of killer defensive front, that's what this Michigan offense was able to do against Bama. Again, you have a much tougher challenge going up against this Washington offensive line. But for the Michigan Wolverines, this is all about getting back to Michael Penix. They have 38 sacks on the year, 6 of them in the game against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Fact check that. Yep, 6 sacks, 5 of them in the first half. If you're going to disrupt this Washington offense that can just turn it on at any moment and be absolutely dynamite. You need to find a way to solve the offensive line, and you need to find a way to solve Michael Penix as well. That guy does not just have an arm. He's really good at being able to read pressure and see the different blitzes that are coming his way. So this is a Michigan defensive front. Again, not a killer, take over the game pass rush. However, they are very effective at being able to provide pressure to opposing quarterbacks. You have to provide all the pressure in the world to Michael Penix. Other than that, your rush game, your rush defense has to continue to be fantastic, on third down. This team has one of, if not the best turnover margins in the entire country. So fix your ball security issues, maybe force a turnover or two, but that secondary as well. The only secondary that was comparable to Washington's, or I should say the only wide receiver group that Michigan's played that's comparable to Washington's, is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Probably the two best wide receiver rooms in the country when you're comparing Ohio State and Washington. And I'll give you a stat here in a minute that really signifies why the Michigan secondary could be in some big trouble. But let's dive on in now to my what to watch for. They're kind of like your keys to the game, and they're things I think you should keep an eye on while you're paying attention to this one. Maybe a little bit of predictions on what I think here is going to happen. Let's start out with the Washington Huskies. What does Washington have to do to win this game? You've heard me talk about a couple things already, but I'll talk about them more formally here. Michael Penix, first off, let's take a look at this Washington offense. Michael Penix is on fire. Look, he was the lead Heisman candidate throughout basically the entire first half of the season. Everyone looked and said, well, if the guy continues to play like that, no way he doesn't win the Heisman. And then he started to tail off, and the interception started to plague him. The Michael Penix that I saw in that Sugar Bowl is the Michael Penix that we saw in the first half of the season. That same Michael Penix, I think, is going to show up. Michael Penix is on an absolute tear. He is playing really good football right now. His wide receivers are electric, and I do not think Michael Penix is going to be slowed down. Now, that is what Michigan is going to try to provide, but I think Michael Penix is going to have himself a game for the ages here in this game. Prediction on where the game is heading? Well, maybe not. You'll find out later. But these wide receivers going up against this Michigan secondary that has a ton of really good guys that can, or a ton of guys that can play the ball really well. Mike Sainristil is a converted wide receiver. He knows how to play the ball. If Will Johnson gets significant playing time, he can play the ball. Rod Moore was the guy that got the game-stealing interception against Ohio State. There's a ton of talent in this secondary. However, here's the stat that I was alluding to earlier. Ohio State's wide receivers had 15 yards per completion on this Michigan secondary. And maybe besides the Washington Huskies, Ohio State's the best wide receiver room in the entire country. Washington has got the best wide receiver room with one of, if not the best quarterback in the country. They have a ton of guys that can make huge plays, but again, you have a lot of members of the secondary that are really good at playing the ball. These Husky wide receivers have won 50-50 balls all year. They have to continue to win them here in this game. But the Husky defense, you need to bring that intensity and the energy that I saw them play with in the Sugar Bowl. You need to disrupt what Michigan is doing in the backfield. Now, Michigan is still going to try to do some things with misdirection and trying to throw Washington off base and off balance. But if you can get into the backfield, you can have this rush defense find something, and you can slow down Blake Corum, you can slow down Donovan Edwards, you can keep J.J. McCarthy in the pocket and make the Michigan wide receivers go win those 50 balls. Again, I think Michigan's a very underrated wide receiver room, but you got a lot of guys in this Husky secondary that can ball out as well. Bring the intensity, bring the energy, and again, create pressure in that backfield. That's how Washington wins this game. How does Michigan win this game? It's going to be really tough to do, but you need to get McCarthy and company in a rhythm early. First play, let's go all the way back to around 4:10, 4:15 Eastern Standard, or I should say 5:10, 5:15 Eastern Standard Time. J.J. McCarthy, first play of the Rose Bowl. Oh no, it looks like he's thrown a pick. Woo, Caleb Downs stepped out. That can't happen here. J.J. McCarthy and company may need, if they get the ball first, or even if they get the ball second, you may end up needing to score on your first drive. You need to set the tone, especially offensively. Michigan's defense has set the tone all season long, and we'll talk about that more in depth here in just a little bit. But J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, this wide receiver room, do the things that you were doing against Bama. Run the misdirection plays, run some of your 11 personnel that got Alabama off base, because you prepare for 12 personnel, guarantee Washington's going to prepare for 11 personnel there as well. Maybe do some 21 personnel, some 22, things like that. Get a ton of different personnel groupings in there. Continue to mix in the guys that we haven't seen a whole lot this year, like Morris and Orji and Mullings. It's only going to get this Washington defense off base, and it's only going to provide really good things for this Michigan offense, but they have to get in a rhythm early. If this becomes a shootout, I think it's going to be really hard for Michigan to win this game. But I don't see this one becoming a shootout, because this Michigan defense has been as good as any defense across the entire country. Now, pressuring Penix and locking down these wideouts is going to be much harder than what you saw against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Again, that Alabama offensive line is one of the worst in the country in pass protection. After that game, they've allowed 49 sacks on the year. Not a stat that Nick Saban is going to be very happy with, but those 6 sacks, something Michigan was very happy to see. They kept Jalen Milroe in the pocket, and they got him down. Now, obviously, the second half was a different story, but you need to be able to get Penix on the ground, because, again, much like Jalen Milroe, Michael Penix is not going to get outside of the pocket and run. He's very much so a pocket passer. If you can get him outside of the pocket and try to play make, it's not where he's most comfortable. He can still do it, but he's really good at reading pressure and then being able to stay in the pocket. You need to give Penix nowhere to run. And again, like we've talked about with Washington's wide receivers, continue to win the 50-50 balls against this Michigan secondary. This is a Michigan secondary that's going to have to play much better than what it did against Ohio State. Now, again, Will Johnson, Rod Moore made a couple of very nice plays. There were a couple of picks in that game against Ohio State, and at times Ohio State got predictable, and Michigan secondary was able to catch on. Washington won't do that. This is the Michigan secondary with those guys like Moore and Mikey Sainristil, and all of those members of the defensive back group just need to ball out, and you may need to go up and win a 50-50 ball if you are a member of the Michigan secondary. Easier said than done against this Washington Husky wide receiver room, but I think the Wolverines' physicality give them a sort of edge. Washington is going to come in and try to match the physicality of Michigan, but it's not their game. I think Michigan's physicality is going to provide something that Washington hasn't seen all year. Now, they've played Oregon twice, and Oregon can be a very physical game, but Oregon can be a very physical team, especially on that defensive front and on the offensive line as well. I believe they only allowed 5 or 6 sacks all year long. But this is a Michigan team that, when you take a look at it, this is just one of, if not the most physical team that America has seen this year. And I think it's going to play a huge factor here in this game. Again, Washington has played a team like Oregon, and they've played some really good defenses like Utah and Oregon State that have been physical. Michigan is more physical than them. And again, back to Washington playing Oregon. I think Washington is going to be up to the task here. They've played a physical defense like Michigan. They've played a physical offensive front, but they haven't played a super duper physical run game like what Michigan is going to bring. And I think that sets the edge. Michael Penix and company are going to have their moments. They're going to throw for a ton of yards. They're going to score points. And at times, it's going to look like this Michigan secondary is scrambling. But I think if J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum and this Michigan offense get in their rhythm, especially if Blake Corum can get going and break into the second level, that's only going to open up this pass game more, because you always have to prepare for Blake Corum and what this Michigan run game is going to do. This is going to be an absolutely phenomenal game. It's time now for my official game prediction, and I like the Michigan Wolverines. They were my preseason pick to win the national championship, and I'm going to stick with it. Is it going to surprise me if Washington wins this game? No, absolutely not. Again, Washington is going to want to turn this game into a shootout, because if this game becomes a shootout, I don't see Michigan winning this one. I just don't think they have the offensive firepower to keep up with Washington. But this Michigan defense is too talented to not make some plays. It's not going to pull a game like they played against TCU last year, where Michigan's defense was getting beat and they had lapses and things like that. Camera freaked out again. I don't know why it keeps doing that to all of you fine people there, and my score had gone away. But I think Michigan's physicality gives this Michigan team such an edge, and I think it's going to win them this game. Trying to match the physicality if you're Washington, trying to match the physicality of this Michigan team is going to be really hard. For this Michigan team, trying to match the offensive output of Washington is going to be hard, but I trust Michigan to provide the offensive output more than I do Washington to keep up physically with Michigan. And that is why I think Michigan is walking away with the national championship. You could argue they've been the best team all season long. They faced their adversity, they've had their moments, and I do not think Michigan is going to be denied a national title. Possibly the last game for Jim Harbaugh. I'm not ready to say that quite yet, but all I know is that I think Jim Harbaugh in the maize and blue are going to be lifting that national championship trophy. 30-28 is where I see this game playing out. I think this is going to be an absolutely phenomenal game. Please let me know what you think of this game in the comment section below. I think just Michigan makes enough plays offensively. The defense comes away with a takeaway, and the Michigan Wolverines will be your 2024 national championship, at least according to me. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And as always, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I'll see you for an instant reaction and a review of this game once it takes place. Goodbye.